What if ozone suddenly disappeared? Imagine a bright sunny morning. The sky is blue, the air feels fresh, and people go about their daily routines. But suddenly, something invisible, yet essential, is gone. The ozone layer, our planet's protective shield high above in the atmosphere, has completely disappeared. Without warning, Earth is left naked under the full force of the sun. The ozone layer is not just a thin blanket of gas, it acts as Earth's guardian, filtering out most of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. Without it, ultraviolet rays, especially UVB and UVC, would hit the surface directly, turning the entire planet into a deadly environment. Within minutes of its disappearance, radiation levels would spike to catastrophic levels. Human skin exposed to the sun would burn in just a few minutes. Sunlight, once life-giving, would become a weapon. Eye damage, blindness, and skin cancers would surge uncontrollably. Even staying outside for a short time would be dangerous. Human immune systems would collapse under constant UV bombardment. Diseases that were once manageable would spread more easily, while new illnesses might emerge due to weakened biological defenses. Hospitals would be overwhelmed almost immediately. The oceans, the cradle of life, would suffer next. Tiny organisms called phytoplankton, the foundation of marine ecosystems, would die in massive numbers. These microscopic beings are highly sensitive to UV radiation, and without the ozone shield, they would not survive. The collapse of phytoplankton would trigger a chain reaction. Small fish and crustaceans that depend on them would starve. Larger predators like tuna, dolphins, and whales would soon follow. The entire marine food web would collapse from the bottom up. Even more alarming, phytoplankton produce much of Earth's oxygen. Their sudden decline would drastically reduce the oxygen supply in the atmosphere. Humanity and all animals would face a double crisis: poisoned air from UV exposure and reduced oxygen to breathe. On land, plants would wither. UV radiation damages DNA and disrupts photosynthesis, the very process that allows plants to turn sunlight into energy. Leaves would burn, growth would slow, and entire harvests would fail. Crops that billions of people rely on, wheat, rice, corn, would see dramatic yield reductions. Fields that once fed nations would turn into barren lands. Global food systems would collapse, and famine would spread across continents. Animals would not escape this fate. Their skin and eyes would be severely damaged by UV rays. Many species, unable to adapt quickly enough, would face extinction. Birds would lose both their food sources and safe habitats. Insects, particularly pollinators like bees, would die in mass. Without pollinators, flowering plants would fail to reproduce. Fruits and vegetables would vanish from our diets. Entire ecosystems that depend on these plants would unravel. Humanity would be left with fewer and fewer sources of nutrition. Freshwater systems would collapse too. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands are home to delicate ecosystems that cannot withstand direct UV radiation. Fish populations would die off, and the chemical balance of water systems would shift dangerously. The atmosphere itself would become unstable. The ozone layer helps regulate Earth's temperature by absorbing ultraviolet radiation. Without it, heat distribution would change. Some areas might experience blistering heat waves, while others would fall into unpredictable cold spells. This imbalance would supercharge extreme weather events. Storms, droughts, and floods would grow more violent. Climate chaos would make survival even harder for both humans and wildlife already weakened by radiation and famine. For human civilization, daily life would become unrecognizable. Outdoor activities would be nearly impossible without protective gear. Cities would need to build massive domes or go underground to shield their populations. Protective clothing, UV-proof glass, and advanced shielding would become as vital as food and water. Living outdoors would no longer be an option for most of humanity. Only the wealthiest nations might manage to adapt quickly. Economies would collapse under the weight of this disaster. Agriculture, transportation, and tourism industries that rely on outdoor activity would disintegrate. Trade would stop. Supply chains would collapse, and unemployment would soar. Global inequality would widen. Countries with resources and technology might survive, while poorer nations would face starvation and chaos. This imbalance would spark migration crises, as billions of people fled in search of safer places to live. Wars over food, water, and habitable land would likely break out. Governments would declare states of emergency. Borders might close, and nations would fight to secure dwindling supplies. Human conflict would rise alongside environmental collapse. Yet, there could be a path to survival. Scientists might attempt to engineer artificial ozone or create protective satellites to block UV rays. Indoor farming powered by artificial lights could replace outdoor agriculture. Advanced biotechnology could engineer crops and even humans to withstand higher radiation. Cities might be rebuilt underground or beneath protective domes. Technology would become humanity's last hope. Still, these solutions would only protect a fraction of the global population. Billions would perish in the transition, and civilization as we know it would never recover fully. The world would enter a new, harsher era of survival. In the long run, nature might adapt in surprising ways. New species could evolve with radiation-resistant traits. Underground and deep-sea ecosystems might become the new centers of biodiversity. Life would continue, but it would be far different from what we know today. Ultimately, this scenario shows how fragile Earth's balance truly is. The ozone layer may be thin, but it is essential. Without it, our planet would be a hostile wasteland, stripped of its ecosystems and dangerous to all life. So what if the ozone suddenly disappeared? Humanity would face burns, blindness, famine, and collapse. Ecosystems would unravel, species would vanish, and civilization would struggle to survive. It would not just be a crisis, it would be the end of the world as we know it.